IP, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Do we need to explicitly define any public subnet so that it will assign that public IP from public subnet?
No, there is nothing like that. See, it is not related to any other network, right? So the moment when you use IP address, public IP address, more in specific, it doesn't require any other network related stuff. It will go and attach itself to the resource. For example, if it is a VM, it will get assigned to the network interface card of the VM, right?
Okay.
If it is a load balancer, it will get assigned to the load balancer. Or maybe the backend resources will also show the same public IP address because the load balancer itself is getting the public IP address, right? So in short, so when you create a public IP address, it will not ask you any network related details. What it will ask you is the region, SKU, right? And then whether you want to go with static or dynamic, right? And maybe a couple of other settings like whether you want to go with redundancy. If you're going with
Okay.
the standard, it will ask the redundancy and the DNS name, public internet
Yeah.
DNS.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
nothing beyond this.
Okay. So on behalf of us, Azure will register this public IP in external DNS.
So yeah, correct. So what is basically happening is Azure has got a pool of public IPs. Okay, so they have a pool of public IPs. So from that pool, you will be assigned one of the public IP address, right? And if you want to assign a name to this, you can assign that again will be with Microsoft DNS name, right? Central US dot something you had shown, last time. So it will pick the public IP address name based on the region where it is. Right? For example, I didn't configure a DNS name for this. If I go and hit DNS name for that public IP address, so it is a DNS name with the region dot cloud app dot azure dot. So this will either you can access this VM over the internet using the DNS name, whatever you give here. For example, I gave VM1 and let us say that is not there. So maybe I'll put some numbers there. So I can access this VM using this public IP address or with this DNS name over the internet. So that is the purpose.
Okay. In case if customers want their domain, then they have to register it
Then
in their DNS,
you
right?
should go to your domain, and then you need to add,
Yeah.
a public IP address with the
Yeah. Maybe
what do you call
GoDaddy or
it?
somewhere.
Yeah. So, for example, if you purchased uh, uh, some domain, in this case abd.co.in, so I can go and create a post a record, and I'll say that if I want to use www or some name I can give, right? Then I can give some or www.abc abc.abd.co.in something, and that will have a public IP address. You can do it. So this you are
Okay.
doing on the DNS of your organization, public DNS zone,
Yeah.
right?
Got it.
So here in this case, it creates a record, but it creates in the Azure DNS
Okay.
zones.
Got it.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. So today we are going to start with the backup part. So we will be uh, covering. We'll see how far we can go. If possible, we'll cover everything. Otherwise, we may have a little bit for tomorrow. Uh, so when we talk about Azure Backup, right? So this Azure Backup service will help you to take backup of resources on Azure. So we can say that Azure hosted. You can take backup of the resources on premises. So for example, you got some services which are running on premises, and you want to take backup of those services to Azure cloud, you can do it. And if you have Azure private cloud, which we call it as Azure Stack, you can also take backup of those resources to Azure cloud. So when it comes to cloud native, which means Azure native resources, you can take backup of resources like VMs, virtual machines, backup. You can take backup of what do we call it as files and folders, files or file share, we can call it as in a storage account. You can take backup of SQL, only SQL, right? SQL in Azure VMs. So for example, if there is a VM and you have a SQL database on that VM, now here in this case, you are taking backup of only the SQL database, not the entire VM. Whereas in the VM section, you are taking the VM as is as a backup, right? So you can also take backup of SAP HANA. Okay, so if you got SAP HANA running in Azure VM, you can just take backup of SAP HANA as well. Okay, so that is another thing. And apart from this, you can also take backup of blob storage. Okay, you can also take backup of blobs. You can also take backup of PostgreSQL, right? PostgreSQL, right? And you can also take backup of disks, right? So these are the various items that which you can take backup of when it comes to the Azure hosted resources. Okay, and when it comes to on-prem, you can take backup of VMs running on Hyper-V hypervisor or VMware ESXi, both environment you can take backup of. Okay, and then you can take backup of SQL, SharePoint, and then you can take backup of Exchange services, which are mail services and other stuff. You can take backup of files and folders. There is a file server on premises and you are taking backup of only files and folders, you can do that. And you can also take backup of system state, okay, OS backup, right? We call it as system state backup. You can take backup of bare metal, which means physical server backup also we can take, right? So this is when it comes to on-premises, right? Azure Stack, you also have similar solutions here. We are not going to get into that, but these are the things that which you can take backup of, right? So now, when it comes to Azure Backup, what service we use, right? So to take backup, we use something called as vaults, okay? So to take backup, you use vaults, right? One is called as backup vault. The second one is recovery services vault, right? You will be using either one of these, okay? So in a sense, some backup solutions are available in backup vault. Some backup solutions are available in recovery services vault, okay? So then which backup solutions are available where, right? So this part, right? VMs and then file shares, what do we call it as SQL in Azure VM and SAP HANA in Azure VM, you can take these backups using recovery services vault. And when you want to take backup of these blobs or PostgreSQL and then disks, you go with backup vault. So based on what type of backup you would like to take, so you will be choosing the respective vaults. Okay. Now, so in order to take backup, right? So you have two ways to take backup. Okay. So to take backup, you use a tool called as Backup Center. or Azure Backup Center, right? Azure Backup Center is a service or tool using which you can take backup of all the resources, right? Or you can also use Recovery Services Vault. Recovery Services Vault, right? So most of the times you will be using Backup Center itself, but sometimes some features are not available in Backup Center. Then you go with Recovery Services Vault. But in order to take backup, most of the time you will be using Backup Center. Okay. So where do I find this Backup Center? Let us try to quickly explore it and we'll see how things look like. Okay. So I'm getting into my portal, right? So within this portal, I go and look for a service called as Backup Center. You see this Backup Center? If you go to this Backup Center, this is a service, right? Which gives you a kind of a dashboard to view what is going on with your backup, how many of them are completed, how many of them have failed, and so on. And it is also going to go and give options to take backup itself, to restore, and of course to create vaults, and then a policy and so on. We'll be discussing about them in a while. And then you can also see what instances are getting backed up, and then the logs related to that, whether the backups were successful or failure, any alerts, and then some reports related to the backup. So this is how your Backup Center tool looks like, right? So Backup Center is an interface using which you can take backup. You see what do you call it as the dashboard, where you can understand what is going on with your backups and other stuff, right? But again, to take your backup, as I was saying, either you will be using a backup vault or you will be using a recovery services vault, which means for me to take a backup, I need to create a vault first, right? So either I should be creating a backup vault provided on what I am going to take backup of, or I will be creating a recovery services vault if I'm taking backup of these resources. So before you go and initiate the backup, right? So for example, if you hit this backup, then it straight away asks you about tell me the vault, right? Whether it is recovery services vault or whether it is backup vault. So for example, if I said virtual machine, it automatically picks recovery services vault because virtual machines backups are done using recovery services vault. If I pick, let us say blobs, it automatically picks the backup. So before you come here, right? So you need to have your vault created, right? So before I take backup, I should have my vault created. So for example, I'm taking backup of a virtual machine. Then what vault I should create? I should create a recovery services vault. So I can do it from here, right? I can go to this vault section, and then it is asking me, boss, what vault you want to go with, right? So whether you want to go with recovery services vault or whether you want to go with backup vault. And again, the point I missed is if you're using on-premises backup, then also you will use recovery services vault. So backup vault will not be used for on-premises backup, right? So that's why you see the supported data sources for recovery services vault and then supported data sources for backup vault. Okay. So now what we do is we'll start with virtual machine backup. So we'll first go ahead and create a recovery services vault service.
Vijay, in case if it is a backup vault, then how would the restore happens here?
So both are same. There's no difference as such. There's not much difference. They introduced this recently. Earlier, there was no solution in the backup to take the blobs backup and then this PostgreSQL and other stuff. These are introduced later. I think at one point they may merge all these things. But for now, these two are listed as separate. Okay. So I'm going with recovery services vault because I want to first go with a backup of virtual machines. So I'm creating a vault with the vault type as recovery services vault. Okay. So go ahead and hit continue. Right. It is asking you a subscription, resource group, vault name. Now remember, very important point is the vault should be in the same region where your resources are. Okay, the vault should be in the same region where your resources, which means the resources that which you take backup of sitting, right? So if my resources are in central US, then I should be creating a vault in central US. It cannot be in another region. Okay, so I'm naming this as my vault, right? So tags, review, and create. Okay. So while this goes on, let that get initiated. Right. So there is this service itself called as recovery services vaults. So whenever you create any vault, right? So there is this service called as recovery services vault. So the vault that whatever you created will be visible here, right? In fact, you can create a vault from here itself, right? You see this option, create option. So either you can use the backup center option to create the vault, or you can use this recovery services vault to create it. So both of them are same, right? So whatever the vaults you created, they are visible here. Okay, I'll come back to this vault in some time, but let us go to this backup center. Now we have our vault, isn't it? So the first thing is you created a vault. Then create a backup. But when you create a backup, you should have a policy in place, right? Create a backup with policy. What is this policy? A backup policy defines the schedule of the backup. Right? You should tell your Azure that when the backup should be happening, right? What time? Your backup policy will also tell you about the retention period, how long you want to retain the backup. So there will be a vault when you take backup. When you configure the backup, rather, it will ask you to create a policy. So what will be there in the policy? A policy will have the schedule of the backup, right? When the backup should happen. It will have the retention period, which means how long you want to keep that data or before it overwrites or deletes it. And there are a couple of other settings like snapshots and other stuff that depends or varies from resource to resource, what type of resource you are taking backup of. But we'll see that in detail. Okay. So now what do we do is we have a virtual machine with the name VM1, and I have a requirement of taking backup of this virtual machine. So we'll go to the backup center. Since we had already created a vault, I'm straight away going to this option called as backup. And what is that you want to backup? I want to backup virtual machines. Now it will ask you select the vault. The vault that whatever we created will be visible here. I'll go and select it. Remember, the vault should be in the same region where your VMs are. So hit continue. Now it is asking you backup policy, right? A backup policy, as I said, defines schedule, retention, and couple of other settings. The policy itself is categorized into two. One is standard, second one is enhanced. So if you want to kind of have multiple backups per day and you're looking for some advanced features, you go with enhanced. But otherwise, standard is enough. So you can look at you can take backup once in a day when you go with standard, enhanced based multiple. And then there are a couple of other features like zone redundancy and other stuff can also be configured here. For these are specifically for snapshots. We'll understand what snapshot in a while. What snapshot is in a while. Okay. Now, so what do we do is we go and create a standard policy. So here it picks a name by default with the name default policy, but we'll create new one. Okay, so we'll create a policy. Let us name this as virtual machine backup policy. right? And then it is asking you backup schedule. Do you want to go with daily backup or weekly backup? I want to go with a daily backup. I want to take backup at 1 a.m. Indian time. Or 1 a.m. maybe central time or whatever. You can pick it because this machine is in US. So we can go with 1 a.m. central time. Now there is this option called as instant restore. So this option will be only for virtual machines. Okay. Uh, what is this instance restore option is, right? Let us try to understand it. Right? So when you take backup of any virtual machine, right? When you take backup of a virtual machine, what basically happens is, so let us say this is your VM and you're taking backup of this one, and your backup will be pushed to a vault, right? So the backup will not straight away be taken here. It will not happen like that. So how does this actually work is, it first takes a snapshot backup, right? What is that it is doing is, it is taking a snapshot, right? It is taking snapshot backup. So once you have this snapshot backup, now the backup of the from the snapshot will be transferred to the vault, right? Transferred to the vault, right? So for example, I'm taking backup today. So for example, this today's backup. So there will be a snapshot here. So which means snapshot locally in that region, and then the data will be transferred to your vault, right? So this we call it as snapshot backup, snapshot instance rather. Now, what is the advantage of retaining this snapshot, right? So what is the advantage of these snapshots? See, for your backup to move to vault, it may take some time, right? Sometimes it may take hours or depends on the size, isn't it? So if you have a snapshot, you can quickly restore, quickly restore. So whenever there is a restore requirement, you need not have to, restore it from the vault, right? You can quickly restore from the snapshot itself. Now, what Azure can help you with is, you can have the snapshots of 5 days. Okay, so how many snapshots max I can have is 5, right? So which means at any point of time, right? If I am retaining 5 snapshots, I can restore my last 5 days data from the snapshots itself. So maybe if you are restoring the data from, let us say, 10 days old data, then you will be kind of restoring it from the vault, right? So snapshots here are nothing but a snapshot restore points, or are nothing but they are instant recovery solutions, and you can retain the number of snapshots. The maximum number of snapshots you can retain is 5. So which means if you're taking one backup a day, so I can have maximum 5 snapshots at any point of time, and I can quickly restore the data rather downloading it from the vault and restoring. So that is the advantage of these snapshots. Okay. Now, so let us say you have a snapshot backup. Let us say you took a backup today, and this is your today's backup, which is snapshot, and you can restore it before it transfers to the vault. Maybe after you took the snapshot, the VM crashed, and I assume that the data is not transferred to the vault. You can still restore because you got us this snapshot, isn't it? That is the instant restoration. So that's what it is asking you, right? How many days snapshots you want to retain? It says 5, and then retention range, right? Retention range, right? So a retention here is nothing but how long you want to have your data kept, right? So by default, the daily backup retention period is 30 days, which means I can go and restore my data of last 30 days in case it's required. After 30 days, on 31st day, first day's data will be either overwritten or deleted, right? So daily retention period, you can go up to 30 days. If you want, you can increase it. I think max they can provide is 9,990 days. So 9,999 days, that is the max you can go with. Similarly, this is daily retention point. So what you can also do is in a week, so you can retain 1 day's backup as a weekly backup. So maybe let us say every Sunday's backup you may want to retain, right? You can retain it a weekly backup or so. So sometimes some companies may want to have, let us say 30 days daily backup, but after 30 days, I mean, the first day backup will be gone, isn't it? Right? So maybe you may want to retain one copy of, the previous backups as a weekly backup point. That can also be done. So you can specify, I want to retain one backup every week. That could be either Sunday, Saturday, Monday, or whatsoever, right? So that is your weekly backup retention point, right? Similarly, you can also retain one backup per month. Maybe the first Sundays of the month, kind of, you can go and retain one backup of the month as a monthly retention point. Similarly, you can have one copy of the data every year retained as a yearly backup. And you can go up to 99 years, right? You can have yearly backup up to 99. So these are basically in case if you have some critical data and you want to retain it, instead of retaining the data every day, you can go with monthly retention or yearly retention. So those are some things that which will help you kind of have your data stored, data backed up or archived. And you can also, in case if there is a audit requirement or something like that, you can restore and quickly show the data in case if any such requirements, right? So in short, your backup.
Vijay, could you please explain that monthly backup point retention?
Similar to your weekly itself, right? So in weekly backup, every week, maybe let us say every Sunday's backup, you want to retain as a weekly backup, right? Similarly, every month, you may pick one day or maybe one date, right? So that date's data will be retained as a monthly backup, right? For example, you're taking a 30 days retention for daily backup, right? On 31st day, the first day data is gone, right? But instead of having the daily backup retained, what you can do is you can go with, in a week, I want to retain one day as a backup. And rest of the days you can delete it. You can do that. Or in a month, one day I want to retain a backup. Instead of retaining all 1 week in a month, or maybe all weeks in a month, I can retain one backup in a month. That can also be done. Or you can also keep both of them if you want. Similarly, in a year, you may want to retain one copy of that entire year. That could be first Sunday of the year, or maybe whatever you feel, you can go ahead and take it. So these are basically helping you. So let us say last January backup I need, right? So then I can go with monthly backup point and restore it, maybe whatever the backup I retained as a monthly backup, right? Similarly, maybe you need a backup of 2020, right? Instead of keeping the backup of daily for the entire year, I'll keep one backup in an year, which I feel that is enough for me in case if there is a requirement to restore, right? Did you get it?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So this is the backup policy. Now, whatever you specified in the policy are listed here. Now it is asking you to go with the virtual machines. It is asking you to select the virtual machines that which you want to take backup.
Vijay, I have another question. Suppose if I take backup today, maybe after 5 days, like how does it work? So does it collect only the delta of like whatever the changes happen in these 5 days? Only that would be taken as a backup, or?
So we don't have control on this, but documentation says the subsequent backups are incremental, which means
Okay.
only the delta.
Okay. 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 Got it.
Right. So the virtual machines, whatever you want to take backup of, you can add it. So we want to take backup of this virtual machine VM1. If you have multiple virtual machines in this region, Central US, you can add all of them, right? So I'm going to go and add this virtual machine, right? Now there is this option which says OS disk only, right? Now OS disk only means what? If you want to take backup of only operating system disk, then select this option. Otherwise, by default, it takes backup of system drive or OS disk and data disks if there are any. Right? For example, if this VM1 has got OS disk, anyway it will be there, and let us say it has also got a data disk. And you want to take backup of only OS disk, then you select this option. If you deselect this option, it will take backup of both. By default, it will take backup of all the disks. Okay. So in case if you have an explicit requirement of taking only OS disk, then you should be selecting that. Right. So go ahead and enable backup. Right. So this basically configures backup for that VM. And this backup will be triggered based on the schedule you specified in the policy. Right. Right. So while that goes on, what we'll also see is we'll go and create a storage account. In that storage account, we'll create a file share, and we will use that file share to go ahead and take a backup. Okay. Right. So we said that VMs can be taken backup, a file share backup. We'll see VMs and file shares. And then on premises one, we'll see these files and folders. Because we're not going to cover each one of them, it is not possible. VMs, file share, Azure file share, and then on-premises file server backup. So these are the things. Others, I'll be explaining the on-premises part in theory, but this is what we will be sticking. Okay. If you are interested, you can go and explore beyond that. So I'm going to go and create a storage account.
Vijay, the vault, right? It stores data in any blob or
Yes,
in the
blob.
backend.
I'll show that. I'll show that.
Okay. Okay.
Creating a storage account. So I'm creating this in the same region, Central US. I want to use the existing vault itself. Right. So while this goes on, if you go to your vault, right? So we created a vault, right? So you go to your recovery services vault. This is a vault which we are using, right? Now, the recovery services vault, basically it can be used for two purposes. One is backup, that's what we are using. And the vault can also be used for your disaster recovery solutions, okay? Okay, so now if you go to the properties of this vault, right? So I'm going to the properties of this vault, right? If you look at few things here, right? If you look at the backup configuration, so this data is getting backed up to a storage account, right? In that more specific to a blob service, right? And you can also see that, there is this replication type. By default, it is GRS, which means geo redundant storage, which means the backed up data is not only in central US region, but it is also replicated to the other region, which could be East US too, right? So it will also allow you to enable cross-region restore as well. By default, it is disabled. If you enable it, you will be able to restore the data of this particular backup to other regions as well. Okay. So for example, you took backup of the VM which is in central US, but you would like to restore it into East US too, you can do it. Okay. So by default, this cross-region restoration is disabled. So as you see here, the backup is happening to a storage account. The storage account will be GRS by default. If you want to change, you can change it, but you should be doing it before you start backing it up, right? Since we already initiated the backup, we are not able to change this. But in case if you want to change it, come here and change it before you start using it for backup purposes. Okay. And then the data of this backup is also encrypted by default by using Microsoft encryption keys. You are allowed to use your own encryption keys, right? And if you look at a couple of other important settings, there is this option called as soft delete, which is basically by default enabled. Now, what does this mean is, if you delete your backup, right? For example, I took backup of a VM and I deleted the backup of the VM, right? So um, by default, your backup will be retained for 13 days before it actually deletes it. In the sense, I can go and undelete it within 13 days. For example, if you accidentally deleted a backup and then your business says they want it, if it is Azure, you can go and revert it back within 13 days, right? And that's it. This soft delete option is applicable for virtual machines, SQL servers in Azure VM, and SAP HANA in Azure VM. So this will help you in case if there are some accidental deletions or whatsoever, right? It's almost like when you delete a file in your machine, it goes and sits in a what do you call it as a recovery bin, right? So similarly, here also when you delete a backup, it will be retained for 13 days, and you can always go and undelete within those 13 days, right? After that, you can't do anything, right? Some of the important settings that which you should be aware of when it comes to the vault. Okay. Now, so let us go back to our backup center. Right now, backup instances, you can see there is one VM configured, or you can go to this manage backup instances, and you should be seeing this VM. Latest restored point is nothing because there is no backup yet, right? You can go to the details of it, view resource. Oh, not this one. Okay, so let us go to this one itself. Right. So when you hit that backup, now you see the settings of that VM backup, right? You can wait for this schedule as per this policy, or if you have a requirement to take a custom backup or a copy backup, then you can go and take backup by using this backup now option. If you already got backup, then you can restore the entire VM. You can restore the files from that VM. You can stop the backup. If you had stopped the backup, you can resume it. You can delete the backup. If you recall our option to restore the secondary region, if you enabled it in the vault level, you can restore to the secondary region. And if the soft delete is enabled within 13 days, you can undelete it, right? So these are the options you see here. Now, we don't want to wait till 1 o'clock. So what we do is we go and initiate a backup by using this backup now option. So rather waiting for the schedule, I am taking a custom backup, right? So I'm hitting this backup now. Since this is a custom backup, how long you would like to retain this custom backup, if you want to retain it. So we'll leave this. I think by default it picks 1 month. So I'll leave that as is. I'll go and trigger the backup. So now the vault is taking the backup of this VM. So which we initiated manually, right? We initiated manually. Right? So this backup will go on as we were discussing. It takes first what backup? It takes a snapshot. Then it pushes the snapshot to the vault. Right? 2 steps, right? So you can always go to this backup jobs option to see what is happening, right? Uh, so we should see some alerts here also, right? Right. So this is this VM1 on-demand backup, which is in progress. You see it. If you go to this instance itself, if you look at it, is taking snapshot backup. After this is done, it transfers the data to the vault, right? So it may take some 10 to 15 minutes of time for this backup to complete. We leave this backup to go on. Then in the meantime, what do we do is we'll work on the file share backup. Okay, so let that go on. Once that backup is completed, we'll see how do we restore the entire VM, how do we restore uh, files and folders of a VM. So that part we will see. Okay, so let that go on, right? So the second scenario, what we pick is, so let us say you got a file, a storage account. In this storage account, you got a file share, and this file share, let us say, has got some files and folders which are critical for your organization, and you want to take backup of the files and folders in this file share, right? So then you use the same vault solution to take backup. Again, the same concept. You need a vault. You can use an existing vault or you can create a new one. Of course, this also requires a policy which defines when the backup should happen, how long the backup should be retained, and then the resource itself which you want to take backup of. That's all, right? Right? And then you go ahead and initiate the backup based on schedule. If you have a requirement, you can initiate a custom backup. So same thing, whatever we have just seen can be done by using the file share service as well, right? So what do we do is we create a file share and we'll try to put some data in a file share and try backup, and we'll see how do we take backup and restore it. Okay. So since we created a storage account just now, right?
Vijay, I have a quick question now. So for this backups, should we need a separate storage account or we can use existing storage account? In
It
real time,
creates
generally,
a
how do we
storage account
differentiate?
for you. You are not creating any storage account. For VM, did we create any
Uh,
storage account? No.
no, no, not for VM. I'm talking about this backups, right? You created a separate storage account now, right? For the demo.
No, we didn't.
Okay, okay.
No, I didn't get your question. Maybe you have to repeat it.
No, actually, so at the start of the demo, you created one storage account, right?
Yeah, this storage
For
account, what I
this.
created is to demonstrate the file share part. It has nothing to
Okay,
do with this VM backup.
okay.
Still confusion?
No, 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 nothing. I got it.
You got it?
So we are not at all defining the blob storage at all, right? In the backend. So the vault itself is like a blob storage, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So we are, see, for your backup, to store your backup, if your question is to store my backup, did you create any storage account? If that is your question, no.
Yeah.
Like one means like subscription is asking like subscription means like normally we take for the like anything like subscription, right, in the Azure concept. So for the storage backup also we take any separate subscription or like the existing one will add in that is asking, I guess.
You use the same subscription. We don't go with any new subscription. Subscriptions, there is a logic, no? So you create subscriptions based on either some logic like department or so you need to know on what basis you are going to bill it. Right? So your vault will be tagged to that subscription. So the cost will be to the subscription itself. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Right. In this storage account, I am creating a file share. I'm calling this as my file share. And we'll upload some data to this. Let's try to put some data here. Right. And you have a requirement of taking backup of this file share in the storage account, right? So then you will be using the same backup center, right? Now use the same backup option. Now instead of data source as virtual machines, now I select Azure files in a storage account, right? So then it asks you to which vault you want to take backup. So we already got a vault. I want to back up to the same vault, right? So go ahead and hit continue. Now it is asking you, tell me where is your file share, right? You are saying you want to take backup of a file share. Now you need to tell where is your file share. Obviously, you need to select a storage account, right? This is a storage account. So your storage account will be locked. If you don't want, then you can deselect this. But that's okay to have that locked. So it registers the storage account and adds it to the vault. And then we will be able to kind of add the file share in that storage account. It takes a while. Okay, it's got added. Still registering. Huh? So it's added. Now I can go and pick the file share in that storage. Right. Now, if you look at the next settings, it is asking you to define the policy. Right. So similarly, like what we did for a virtual machine, you can create your own policy for a storage account. Storage account backup policy, you can say, and how frequently you want to go with this backup. It's a daily backup or what time you want to go with. Now, if you look at closely, there is no snapshot backup option here, right? The snapshot backup options is only for VMs, right? So then the same retention periods and other stuff, right? So say go ahead and say, okay, I'm not going to modify anything here, right? Go ahead and enable that. So now this enables backup for your file share, and backup will happen at 7:30 p.m. daily at UTC, right? So that's how you can configure a backup for your file shares, right? Now, if you go to your backup center, right, all the backups, whatever you are taking, they are visible here under the manage section. And of course, you can also see here in the um, dashboard also, right? So currently there is one backup in progress, which is on demand. And then you can see there is this virtual machine which is configured with what do you call it as backup. But if you want to look at all other instances, right, file shares or blobs, go to the backup instances. So now you see the data source type here is shown as virtual machine. So that's why only VMs are listed here, right? If I filter this and I'll say I want to look at the file shares that which are getting backed up, you should also see a file share, right? That which is getting backed up here, right? So this is a file share that which you are backing up, right? Right. So if you go to the file share itself, now you see similar settings. backup now, restore the share, which means restoring the entire share, restore a file from that share, that can be done by file recovery. If you had stopped the backup, you can resume it, and then you can delete the backup. Remember, soft delete option is not there for file shares. Okay, soft delete is for VMs and then SQL in Azure and SAP HANA in Azure, not for other services. Like our virtual machines, I want to go and take a copy backup of this. I'll go ahead and take a copy backup instead of waiting for the schedule to trigger it. I'm taking an instant backup, right? Which means that the backup of this file share will be taken. You can see that here in the backup jobs, right? So what is happening, what backups are going on, right? So if you look at this, my file share configure backup is completed, but we should also see another instance that on demand backup is also completed because it is a small files there. It completed the backup also, right? I can look at that whether the backup is completed, failed, where under the backup jobs. So which means the file share that which we are working on, right, has got a backup. So that's why you see this restore, entire file share, restore, file recovery, all these options are enabled. Earlier, these two options were grayed out. If you also look at this, last successful backup at 8:39, right, AM, which means a minute back. Now I assume that there is a problem with the data in the file share. Got corrupted or somebody deleted some files. So then you are asked to restore, right? So sometimes you may have to restore only one or two files of the entire share. Those type of situations you go with file recover. Sometimes you may have to recover the entire, you may have to restore the entire file share itself, all the files and folders in it. That time you go with the restore share option. Okay, so let us see both of them. Okay, so there is this option called as restore share, which means it will restore the entire file share, all the files and folders in that file share. It is asking your restore point. Restore point is nothing but backup point, right? In case if you got multiple backups, maybe yesterday's, day before yesterday's, and so on, you will be going and selecting the restore point, right? So there is this only one restore point we have. I'm going to go and select that. Now it is asking you, you are anyway restoring the file share. Now tell me, you want to restore to the alternate location or original location? If it is alternate location, now tell me to which storage account you want to store. In that storage account, in which file share you want to store. Or if it is a, if you want to restore it to a folder, tell me to which folder you want to restore. Or if there are already some files in that folder, then what do you want to do? Skip or overwrite. So you can restore to the alternate location or you can restore to the original location. If you are restoring to the original location, then how do you want to manage the conflicts? Which means if there are already some files there, what do you want to do? You want to skip or you want to overwrite, right? So this is the option that which you get when you go with the restore the entire share. Now, in case if you want to restore some files out of the entire share, if you want to restore only some files, then you can go ahead and select the restore point like what we did earlier. Now you again tell whether you want to restore to the original location or alternate location. If it is alternate location, then you get the same options. But if it is original location, do you want to overwrite or skip? So in this particular case, I get this option called as add files, where I can go and pick the files and tell that restore only these files. But when you are restoring the entire share, you don't get this option of selecting the files and telling that restore only these files, right? So when you go with file level recovery, you go and select the files that which you would like to restore, right? And of course, you will be specifying whether it is original location or alternate location. So, but what I want to do is, I want to restore in the same storage account in the same file share, but I want to restore them in a folder called as restore. And of course, that folder doesn't exist. It creates and then restores. So let us say I want to restore only these two files. So I go and I did hit this add and I selected those files and added it. So that's why you see these two files here, right? And then I go and hit restore, right? So what this basically does is it goes and restores those two files, right? Restores those two files, right? Right. If you go and look at this backup center and jobs, you should be seeing logs saying that, the restoration is in progress, right? So once it is completed, then we should be able to go ahead and see, whether those are restored or not. You can see these two files. The restoration is completed. If you go to your file share in a storage account, right? So you should be seeing that restoration here. So it created a restore folder that it restored the required files, whatever you said to restore it. Now you want to restore the entire share, you can do it. Right? Similarly, whatever we did in the same way, you can restore the entire file share. Right? So like this, you can take backup of your file shares in a storage account and restore. Okay. Now, so let us go back to our backup center. Let us look at what is happening with our virtual machine. Okay. Now, if I go to these instances, now I'll filter this back to VM. So my VM, if I go to the virtual machine, which is backup, if you look at closely, there's a last backup which is successful. The restore point, what we have is this. If you go back and look at the jobs, though the job, it says backup is in progress, for us there it is showing it is completed, because if you go to the backup job, snapshot backup is completed. It is still showing progress because it is transferring the data to the vault, right? So for us here it shows a backup is available because you got a snapshot backup, right? So now using this snapshot backup, whatever we have, or snapshot whatever we have, we can restore the data, right? Or you can restore the entire VM. We'll see both the scenarios. Okay. So now assume that this VM which is backed up. Now there is a problem with this VM. Maybe let us say there is some virus issue or whatsoever, and your business comes and says which we want to restore, or we want to create a new virtual machine. By retaining the old one, we want to create a new virtual machine out of the backup. That's what the requirement is. So in the sense, they want to retain the old VM as is. From the backup, they want you to create a new virtual machine, right? So then how do we do that? Okay. So go to your backup center, right? And then you see this option called as restore, right? Right? You can use this option, or you can go to the instances, go to the instance that which you are getting back, that you are back, that which you want to restore. You can use this restore option here also. You can do either way. Okay. So I'm still saying restore VM. So restore point, you can select it, right? And then it is asking you some questions, right? Now restore configuration, you're creating a new VM out of the backup, or you're replacing an existing one. So let us first try to understand the replacing one. When you select the replace option, so what basically this restoration does is, it goes and restores the disks of the VM. So your VM1, which is operational currently, has got the disks, isn't it? So those disks will be replaced by the backup disk. It won't touch any other configuration. So in the sense, when you go with replace existing, only the disks of the existing VM will be overwritten. Other configuration will be intact. Nothing will be changed. But our requirement is not so, right? Our requirement is to create a new one, right? So when you replace the existing one, so if you look at restore type, replace the disk, and it is asking you something called as staging location. A staging location here is nothing but a temporary storage location. A staging location is nothing but a temporary storage location for restoring your VM. So when Azure restores, it straight away doesn't restore to restore the VM or the disks. Rather, it dumps the data to a temporary storage. From there, the actual restoration will happen. So for this temporary or staging location, we need to specify a storage account. So that's what it is asking you, a storage location here, which is for temporary storage. So before it actually restores it, it dumps to a temporary staging location. From there, the restoration will happen. Whether it is creation of a new VM, whether it is replacing the existing one, you need a staging location, right? Okay. So our requirement is not to replace the existing VM, rather our requirement is to restore, to create a new VM, right? That's why we select restore configuration as create new, and then restore type. Now here also you get two types. So if you look at closely, create a new VM, restore disks. So when you are selecting new, here you can also even restore disks, or you can create a new virtual machine, right? So maybe you want to download or restore the disks, and you want to map those disks to the existing VM. You can do it, right? Instead of replacing the disks, here you are restoring the disks and then mount those disks to the existing VM, which means your old disks are still there. You can still have those old disks retained. But when you are replacing the existing one using this option, your existing disks are overwritten. But here in this case, you are downloading the only disks. If you want, you can map these disks or mount to these disks to the existing VM by dismounting the current disks. Now you want to create a new virtual machine, you can go and select to create new virtual machine option. So when you are saying create a new virtual machine, obviously it will ask you a name of the virtual machine, resource group, VNet, subnets, and so on. That's what you are expected to provide the information. So I'm naming this new virtual machine as VM1-restore. Let us say so. Right? And then resource group, in which VNet, which subnet, maybe I'll put in the same VNet subnet, staging location, right? As I said, we need to provide a storage account here. We already got a storage account, we'll use that itself. This is for temporary stage, right? So go ahead and hit restore. So what this basically does is it creates a new virtual machine, right, in the same region where the backup is, with the name VM-restore, right? Go ahead and restore. So now this goes and restores a VM. In some time, we'll be seeing a new virtual machine, getting deployed. Right. If you go to backup jobs, you should see there should be a restoration that should be in progress. This is backup, not restoration. Right. So you see there is a on-demand restore. Right. So what you will see in some time is in the virtual machines section, you see one more VM getting, one more VM running here. Okay. So this is how you can restore the entire virtual machine, or if you want, you can restore the disks, or you can replace the existing VM. Okay. We'll come back to this in a while. Now, let us take another scenario, right? Assume that the requirement now is, instead of restoring the entire VM, you are asked to restore some files and folders, not the entire VM. Maybe there is one file that which is corrupted, and your business says that you want to restore it, right? Your business says, I want only 2 files to be restored from the entire VM. In those type of situations, obviously you cannot go and restore the whole VM, isn't it? You should be restoring only those files that which are asked, right? Then how do we do that? Right? So let us see that part, right? So go to your backup instance, right? So the instance that which you would like to restore, this is VM1 which we would like to restore. But now I don't want to restore the entire VM, rather I want to restore some files, right? So go with the file recovery. Same like what it asked earlier, it asked you, boss, tell me which day's data you want to restore. Now, it will give you some options here which we need to understand. This restoration will work little different, okay? So when you are restoring some files and folders, so what you are given is you are provided with a script, right? You see this script which you can download and run. So this script will also come with some password. The moment you hit download, it will also generate a password for you. So you need to run this script on the system wherever you would like to restore. It can be the same source from where the backup is taken, or it can be some other machine also. You can restore it on any other machine as well, not necessarily on the source. So you are going to go and run this script wherever you would like to restore. So when you run this script, it will ask you this password, you enter it. Then what happens is, so the disks of the VM, this VM which you backed up, will be mounted on this machine. The disks will be mounted, right? Like your F drive or E drive or whatsoever. They will be mounted. So once these disks are mounted, you can just do a copy paste. Right? I can go to this mounted disk. I'll copy the file and I'll paste it. Once I'm done with the copy paste of the required files, which means recovery, I'll go and just unmount it. So when you're going with file level recovery, you will be using a script provided by Azure. You can download it from here. And of course, it also generates a password. So you are going to go and run that script with the password on the machine wherever you would like to restore. Once the restoration is done, right? Once the restoration is done, you are good to go ahead and right restore, unmount. Right? Let us see how does this actually work. So while we are done with this, our VM will also be restored. Right. So I'm hitting this download executable option. So which basically generates a script for you and of course a password for it.
Vijay, the storage account limit is completely different from this password vault limit, right?
Password?
Sorry, this vault, the backup vault limit and storage vault storage account limit. Those two are two different things, right? And
No,
there
you
is no
don't
limit to
see.
this
There is no
backup vault.
problem here. No, there is no problem here. If you're talking about the size of the storage account, you need not have to worry when it comes to backup. That is managed by Azure itself.
Okay.
So our job
And
is just
here,
to
okay,
kind of initiate the backup and define the retention period. That's all.
okay. And where are we defining this backup of specific files of a VM here? We did it just a file store, right? Sorry, file share, right?
Yes. Earlier we did was file share restore. Now what we are doing is, let us say there is this VM and assume that this VM is a web server. And there is some configuration related to that application. One of the file got corrupted in this VM,
Okay.
right? And your business want from the backup, they want that file to be restored, only that file, so that you can bring back your application to the normal state, right? So in this type of situation, you are not asked to restore the VM, right? You are asked to restore a file, right?
Okay.
So for that, what you're doing is, instead of restoring the entire VM, you are going with a file recovery of the VM. And when you go with a file recovery, you will be provided with an executable and a password. This executable and the password will be running on the machine wherever you want to restore, not necessarily on the source. So once you run this script, right, the VM, whatever you backed up, right, that VM disks will be mounted to your local machine or wherever you run this script. You can just do a
Okay.
copy paste of that file.
Okay. So we have to go to that backed up instance, right?
Yes.
And select. How do we select the specific files here?
I'll show that. Let us
Okay.
download
Okay.
this.
Okay.
Otherwise, this again I have to do all those things again.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it. Got it.
So download. You see this download script option, right? So hit download.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the script which is provided to you, which is basically a PowerShell script converted into an executable. Right. So I'll just go ahead and run the script. So this is what it says, right? So when you run that script, it basically asks you enter the password from the portal as is and enter. Right? So there is a password which is provided. Copy this password and enter. Right? So which basically launches a PowerShell script. Right? Now this PowerShell script, what it basically does is it mounts your disks of the backup VM. Right? So it detected the old session. It is saying whether you want to disconnect the old one. I'll say yes. Right. So now what it basically uses is it uses the iSCSI service on the local machine wherever you run this script. Right? Wherever you run this script, it uses OS level iSCSI service and mounts your backup VMs disks here. Right. It takes a while. So once you have this, executed, on whatever the machine you run the script, you will be seeing an additional volume here, a new volume getting mounted. So right now you see only C, D, and E. You may see a F drive here, which is nothing but your VM's drive. Now you see that F drive getting mounted. So the backup VM has got 3 or 4 disks. All those disks will be automatically mounted, right? All you need to do is you need to go to that disk, copy the file, restore it, unmount it, which means it will remove this mounted disk.
Vijay, in case if it is the data disks are like more than 1 TB of size, then it will be like time consuming, right? Time taking, right?
No, it will not. It will not.
Okay.
See, it is like your how it basically mounts is it doesn't download your disk to the local machine. Okay, so what it basically does is it's like you had this, you might have heard about this NFS shares or those shares can be mounted using iSCSI service, right? Same here. So it's
Yeah.
just a connection to your disk, which the disk still sit on Azure. So it doesn't, it is not
Okay.
downloading this 127 GB disk. No, it is not. So it's just creating
Okay.
a connection using your iSCSI service. That's what it does. Okay.
Okay.
So now this F drive, you see, so this is your Azure OS disk. Now, how do I say it is a OS disk? The size is 126 GB, right? Now, if you go to this, now you see all the files and folders, right? So maybe let us say you have a requirement to restore some file and folder. Maybe let us say here these files need to be restored. I'll just go ahead and copy them, and then I can go ahead and restore it on my local machine. Right? It's like any copy paste that which we do from one disk to the other disk, right? So same, right? So what is happening here is, so the instance that whatever you have, instead of you using this entire restore VM option, I'm using this file recovery. Okay, so this is the option I used, right? So I'm only recovering the files of the VM, not the entire VM, right? So then you go with this file recovery, and then you specify, which date you want to restore. Then you will be asked to go ahead and download the executable and then run the password and others, right? Okay. Now, if you look at this restoration, it is almost done. Let's say,
Vijay, this script can be run in the bash and host, right? Also, right?
yes, anywhere you can run, even on your, as long as you have that password, you're good, right? As long
Okay.
as you have that password, you're good. You can restore anywhere, right? So now you see these three files are restored. Once you are done with the restoration, after recovery to remove the disk and close the connection to the recovery point, please click unmount disk in the step 3 of the portal. So you can also press Q to exit. So this gets closed, and in some time, we should also see this F drive getting unmounted automatically, right? So that's how you can go ahead and restore the files and folders rather restoring the entire VM. Okay, right now.
Like I, Vijay, like if we taking like backup or restoring anything like in the real time, if we'll get any error kind of messages or like any error kind of thing where we can look in for that in the logs or like somewhere.
Yeah, so if the restoration fails or restoration has got some issue, then you will be seeing the logs here, right? So under the backup job, you'll be able to see. Sometimes you can also see some logs here under the alerts as well. All right. So these are the only two sources from where you can go ahead and look at if the failure is a problem, then what was the problem and other stuff, right?
Okay, thank you.
Right. So if you go back to your virtual machine, so there is this VM, right? VM1 restore, which got restored from the backup of this VM1. And one very important thing that which we need to know is um, the VM name here is VM1. Here it is VM1 restore. The host name of this one, which means the system name of this one is VM-1, and the system name of this one will also be VM-1 because you restored it from a backup. So once you are done with a restore, either you should be naming this to something else or you should be naming this to something else. Otherwise, it may result in the name conflict, right? So before you restore, you can go and rename it to something else and restore it. Or maybe if you want to change this to some other name, you can change it, and you can also do it. And this will have a new private IP address, new public IP addresses. If you want to use the same old private and public IP addresses, you can go ahead and do it by configuring a static IP address to this. And you have to remove that IP address and assign a new IP address here and use the same IP address here. And of course, you can disconnect the public IP address from here and all that. So all those things can be done. So it's just that you need to go to the network interface card and then detach the public IP address and change the private IP addresses to static. I had already shown in one of those classes. Those things can be done, right? Right. So this is how you will be restoring your entire VM. Okay. Now I'll pause here. If you got any questions, we can take.
Is it possible to can you show up like real time errors, like anything if you're facing for this backup and restore, like any error kind of thing, like real time
I'll not
scenario?
be able to do that because errors. Uh, See, it depends on the situation, right? So, what you may go ahead and do is you can may go ahead and look at the documentation part. Uh, Here you get some frequently, issues, frequent issues in the troubleshooting section. You will be able to see, what could be the common issues, right? And some of the errors you can pick it from here. So I'll not be able to produce them. Uh, so if you are kind of want to look at what are the frequent issues that which you may come across, this is the place where you may have to go and refer. Or in case if you are preparing for some interviews and you want to say that these are the issues that which I came across, and you will be picking some scenarios from here and you should be quoting them. Right. Any other questions?
Vijay, how is it this backup part, right? How is it different from the in the VM in the virtual machines section, right? You see that snapshot,
Yeah, snapshot.
backup and snapshot.
Yeah. I got that. So the virtual machines, if you're talking about the backup section in the virtual machine, where is that? Backup, this one, right? This is same. It again points to your vault itself, right?
Okay.
Since we have already taken the backup, it is already giving you, to which vault it is getting backup, right? So the backup configuration will be same. But if you go to the disk and if you're talking about the disk snapshot. This is not backup, right? So this is a point in time state capture of your disk. Okay.
Okay.
So this is kind of you manually take point in time state of the disk. I think I explained this in one of our
Yeah,
class.
yeah.
So you take this snapshot and then from the snapshot create a disk, and from the disk you create a VM, right? So if you have maybe let us say a critical change going on, and you want to take a quick snapshot of the disk, you can take. So it is not backup. It is beyond your backup, right? It is like you can relate it to a snapshot backup of a VMware VM like that.
Okay.
Right. Any other question?
There is no option like VM snapshot here, right?
No.
It's only
So it's
backup.
only
Yeah.
the disk snapshot you take.
Disk snapshot. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So if no questions, there is one small topic which is files and folders, and I'll also take you through how do we take backup of the other services on premises. That will be tomorrow's first part of our discussion. Second part of our discussion, we'll talk about the app services. Okay, so that will be tomorrow's discussion. Then we'll be left with monitoring, and I think I have to cover a couple of other topics like express routes and other stuff. Maybe another 1 day or 2 days. So hopefully by the end of this week, we should be not by the end of mid of next week at least, we'll be completing this course. Okay, right? We would have completed by now, but because of these holidays and other stuff, right? So we will complete backup and then one cache service tomorrow, web apps. On Monday, we will be picking, express route and small topics. Tuesday, we'll be covering monitoring, and that should be the end of our, discussion. Right. Okay. So if no questions, we'll meet tomorrow at the same time. Thank you. Good night, Yugandhar. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day.